Today's episode is brought to you in part by Liquid Death. Murder your thirst with 100% mountain water from the Alps, made by nature, not in a lab. Available both still or sparkling, Liquid Death is infinitely recyclable in tall boy cans, just like beer, and never in plastic. Get a case delivered to your house today at unitedweDrink.com/liquiddeath, and you can get a free koozie pack by using the code FREEKOOZIEAF. That's FREEKOOZIEAF at checkout. Just add any Liquid Death koozie pack to your cart, use the code, buy some water, and get these sweet-ass koozies for free with your thirst-murdering water. From Liquid Death at unitedwedrink.com/liquiddeath. Now enjoy the show. The opinions and statements in this podcast do not represent those of the host's employers, co-workers, family, or imaginary friends. Now enjoy the show.
Happy hour? More like amateur hour. Welcome to United We Drink.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast that wasn't invited to and doesn't want to go to McKellar's stupid beer fest because fuck that shit and fuck him too. Welcome to United We Drink right here on unitedwedrink.com, as well as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and wherever fine podcasts are found. My name is Mike Urevich, and I'm a new eyeglasses wearer, and I like it because I can see things much more clear now. With me, as always, is someone who makes hurricane foam on his brew days an art form. It's Joel Codner.
I was about to say, what the hell is hurricane foam? It should be foam hurricanes.
Same thing. And returning to us after an episode of technological exile, Kevin Abbott.
Yeah, I didn't realize that we got so salty in my absence. I mean, you're starting out yelling at people, insulting them, telling them to go fuck themselves. I'm returning to a whole new podcast.
No, you're not. It's the same podcast. Always been salty, always been surly. That should be our slogan. Always salty, always surly. Thanks everyone for coming back and checking us out. We have a kind of localized episode, but kind of going to try to spin this into a way of talking about things that are broad towards and can affect people on a larger scale. But before we do that, what are we drinking tonight, gentlemen? Joel?
As usual, I've got my Polar Seltzer, this time cranberry lime flavor. I also have a couple of Miller High Lifes queued up, or High Lives, the champagne of beer. Champagne for my real friends and real pain for my sham friends. And I'm on Twitter again, so I know a thing or two about sham friends.
I'm with you on the High Life train tonight, Joel. You got the bottles. My Publix did not have bottles, so I got the tall boys instead. Kevin?
Well, as always, I have several drinks because I have to have several drinks to get through this podcast. I have a glass of Sauvignon Blanc, and I have a glass of Irish whiskey. So, 2 different drinks for Kevin.
Almost
wow,
all
no
the
shameless
students are
plug
covered.
this week.
No, I wasn't in a beer mood tonight, guys. I'm in a really good mood to talk about beer, and I'm really excited to be back because I was looking forward to last week's episode and had all these great stories, and I'm going to have to tell it other times. And I'm just excited to talk about beer, but for whatever reason, not in the mood to drink a barrel amongst beer and plug it like an asshole.
Where's your Sauv Blanc from?
I'd say New Zealand Sauv Blanc.
Ah, I like those.
Nice and tart.
Yes, that's why I like them. All right, guys. So, yes, Kevin was not on the last episode. We're going to have another episode of Brewery Horror Stories at some point to where he gets to tell some of his stories. But I want to revisit 2 episodes ago, really briefly, where we talked about the sale of Brown Distributing. At the time that we did that episode, the only details were of the southern kind of territories of Brown, the Broward and Dade and Monroe County sales. Since then, we've kind of gotten more information as to what is happening with Palm Beach County. The Palm Beach Post posted about this, even published it in their newspaper yesterday, about Brown selling its Palm Beach County territories. Didn't say who to, but we do know who that is. They're laying off all of their employees, some of them as of probably by the time this episode comes out, and the rest by mid-December. And their warehouse in West Palm Beach is not part of the deal. And I think it's safe to say a number of these brands and territories have been sold to Southern Eagle Distributing out of, I believe, Fort Pierce. They are the Bud House up in that area of Florida, just about an hour north of West Palm. Kevin, you are a brand that is highly affected by this whole thing. We talked a little bit about that. How has this played out for you? Are you guys going with Southern Eagle, or has something happened with Gold Coast to take on your Palm Beach territory?
On our side, things are still very much up in the air. We have not been told by Brown Distributing that Southern Eagle is even the people that we're going with, that they're selling to. It's been highly insinuated. There's tons of rumor and innuendo about it, and it seems like it's a foregone conclusion. But so, for those of you who don't know, when your rights get sold, you get a letter in the mail that says your rights have been sold, details the territory, and asks for you to sign off on the sale. That happens every single time. I've been through it now many, many times, more times than I care to ever do, and hopefully ever have to do again. So we have not gotten that letter yet from Brown about Southern Eagle. We did get that about Gold Coast. We have since signed that letter, and we just hosted Gold Coast at our brewery, get to know you kind of thing, and we're getting ready to rock and roll with them ASAP. The transition has already started. But I don't think, if we haven't gotten a letter yet, that means that none of the other brands have gotten a letter yet as well. Doesn't mean there hasn't been some internal conversations with maybe some of the bigger brands because they're trying to get ahead of some things, and maybe they have their luxury on that. But as for us, we don't know. We're definitely up in the air when it comes to that right now.
Yeah, I know some of the bigger brands like Dogfish Head and Funky Buddha have had their Palm Beach County rights fully put towards Gold Coast because it kind of brings them in line with the rest of their family of brands. The Sam Adams brands have always been with Gold Coast, so being that Dogfish Head is part of Boston Beer, that brings them there, and Funky Buddha now is in line with the rest of Constellation and Corona, Modelo, and such.
Well, there's an interesting thing there. I know a lot of the people listening to this podcast are industry insiders, and they may already know this, but across the country, you have a lot of, not every single state, I'm not an expert in every single state by all means, but you have Bud and Miller houses.
Yeah.
And you tend to have this constellation of brands where if you're in a Miller house in a large part of the state, but your rights are in a Bud house in another part of the state, eventually the bigger breweries kind of pressure to get everything in line so that pricing can become streamlined, everything becomes easier, and you can trade beer back and forth. There's a lot of benefits to having your brands aligned in houses because you also have no boundary lines being crossed. At this point, Brown Distributing distributes Budweiser north of Atlantic Avenue and Delray Beach up through Palm Beach County, but it's a small footprint. Well, Gold Coast, my new distributor in southern Palm Beach County and down through the Keys, well, they also cover Palm Beach County, but they don't cover north of that. So when you have different distributors having different grid lines drawn throughout a state and a country and so forth, it's really advantageous to be with one house, as they say, a Buttermiller house. So that's what you're seeing when you're talking about the Dogfish Heads, the Funky Buddhas, the Cigar Cities of the world, doing their best to get aligned. And they're big breweries, and they have a little more weight and a little more say in how they get represented. And they can kind of throw that weight around a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, that's excuse me, it's still work in progress, but those are the things that we've been hearing over the last couple weeks. I feel bad for our bartenders because as if they weren't getting asked enough about what we're going to get into in just a little bit. They've been getting asked a lot of questions about Brown distributing, and we aren't even a Brown distributing brand. And they're like, "Hey, what have you guys heard about Brown?" And some of my bartenders are probably like, "Who's Brown?" Like, UPS? Like, I don't know what you're talking about. But I think
the other thing I just want to throw in there, Mike, is that yes, they are laying off a lot of their workforce or all their workforce, and all those people are not going to get jobs. It's not like the people that are being sold to have just doubled the need for warehouse people and salespeople and what have you, brand managers. But thankfully, we have seen a lot of people interviewing with other companies, and we are going to see a good amount of people in the industry get a chance to continue working in the industry. And that's what I'm seeing and I'm hearing. I'm talking to a lot of those people, and at the very least, they're getting a lot of interviews, and there's a lot of need for some of that staff. So it's heartbreaking when you have people you've worked with. Me personally with Brown, I've worked with Brown for over 10 years. And a lot of these people have worked there for as long. And, they were original fresh beer people who was purchased by Brown. It's good to see some of these people getting a chance and hopefully landing on their feet. Because that's the real devastating part of this, is the people that are losing their jobs.
Oh, absolutely. And there's a lot of talent there. It to me, one of the people who I'm sad to see have to go through this is Scott Fairchild, who is like the graphic design sign shop guy at West Palm Brown. And he's been there for almost 20 years. He was the guy who, anytime you needed a sign made or tap handle stickers made or pretty much anything made by Brown, went through Scott. And in my time working for a Brown brand, I got to know Scott pretty well, and he was always a pleasure to work with. And I hate to see him have to become unemployed, but there's a lot of talent who's going to be available for people. And I think that breweries would be remiss if they didn't talk to some of these people and look at what they can do to maybe try to find a home for them and improve their brands, especially with salespeople in that force.
Agreed.
Joel, any feelings?
Well, as we've established in previous
Just in general.
episodes,
In general,
I don't care
this
about
is how
people,
Joel be.
Well, I'm a little hungry. No.
What was that?
I said, well, I'm a little hungry and cold. Are those feelings, is that the one you're trying to talk about, Mike?
Yes.
I've got a tingling sensation between my toes. No, I mean, I said everything I really felt like I needed to say on this on the episode two episodes ago, so
it's like a month ago by now. So this gets us into the main topic. Is it a segue? Maybe not. But so this past weekend, or by the time that we're recording this on October 13th, and word came out that Due South Brewing out of Boynton Beach has announced that they are closing after nearly 10 years of operation. It's been kind of a thing here on the show that we kind of alluded to but never really said. All three of us have worked at that brewery. Joel and I got our starts in this industry at Due South. We all worked together for a year and a half, maybe 2-ish years over there. And we've gone through some stuff over there, good, bad, indifferent. This is a big deal. I apologize for the fucking dog in the background. But this, at the time of Due South opening in May of 2012, they were the second production brewery in Palm Beach County. They were probably the I'm not looking at stats right now offhand, but it might have been the second production brewery in South Florida at the time, behind Tequesta. I mean, there were some brew pubs and this and that, but I mean, Due South was one of the OGs of South Florida brewing. And you can say what you want about the beer or the brewery or whatever. This is a huge deal to announce a closure of someone who's been around through practically the entire existence of South Florida beer. So, with that said, Joel, I texted you when I found out about this news, and you seemed utterly shocked. So, walk me through what you thought when I texted you that.
Well, first, let me preface my response by letting you know that you're always talking about ways to monetize the podcast. And today I thought of one, which is we do the episode we were planning to do, and then on our Patreon episode, we tell you what we really think.
Okay. Thanks for that now.
No, it was shocking when you texted me. I mean, we've had private conversations about many breweries and their ability or inability to weather the storm of this pandemic. And it was pretty upsetting to read that. I have not stepped foot in that place in 4 years. I resigned and moved on to another job at the time in August of 2017. Left on what I thought was very good terms. Went back a little while later when a hurricane was coming to check on the guys that were still there. But things got very busy for me, and it was just one of those things. I mean, there's a million breweries I haven't been to, and I spent, probably 6 days a week for several years in that place. So, I did keep my distance, intentionally and unintentionally. But, it's upsetting, it's surprising, it's not surprising. And I think I was a little confused by the statement because it said things along the lines of, we're looking for a new home possibly, but we're also selling all the IP and brands and equipment and everything like that. So I don't know if it was just poor wording or if, they were trying to soften the blow by saying, hey, this isn't, necessarily over yet. But I think it kind of is. And it's unfortunate. I mean, I immediately reached out to all the guys I still know over there working in the brew house. I feel for them because they seem a bit blindsided. And, it's a very volatile, saturated industry, and it feels like anything could happen at any time. But, when it actually happens to you, it's got to be quite the shock.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny. I found out from I was busy that day, and I got a DM from friend of the show Gerard, and it just said Due South closing ! Question mark. It was just like, I was like, wait, what the fuck is this? And I looked, saw it, immediately texted you, Joel. And it was just like, I was a little flabbergasted at first. Kevin, what did you think when you heard about this?
I broke the news to him.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. Joel actually walked into my office and said, "Did you hear this?" And I thought he was joking. I just assumed he was joking or something was going on with Due South, and he was, that was his way of telling me about it or opening a conversation about it.
Trust me when I tell you I would not walk up 2 flights of stairs for a joke.
That's a t-shirt. That's a good t-shirt. Can we put that on UnitedWeDrink.com? So this kind of hit home for me. It took me a while to kind of wrap my head around it, because Due South holds a very important place for me in this industry. I've touched on this on the podcast before, but not only did I go to work for Due South, but I almost went to work for Due South before I opened Funky Buddha Production Brewery. While I was still the head brewer at the Lounge, working on what was essentially a large homebrew system, I met Mike and Jody Hawker at Coffee District, a small craft beer bar in Delray Beach. And when they still wanted to call their brewery Blind Tiki Brewing, they were talking about opening up this brewery, and we became friends. And when they settled on Due South and settled on their spot, he was looking for a brewer, and he offered me the position. This is while I was still brewing in the small little lounge, before the big brewery was really in planning. There was whispers that was going to happen, but it wasn't a foregone conclusion. And I had to sit down and think about whether or not I wanted to leave Funky Buddha at the time and go with this new upstart production brewery. And it was a tough decision. And I ended up staying with Funky Buddha at the time. And I continued to work there, then opened up the production facility, and then circled back around when I was unhappy and I realized it was an unsustainable job for me. It was Mike Hawker from Due South that threw me a life preserver and said, "Hey man, you're not happy with what you're doing. Come work for me. I'll pay you better. I'll give you good hours, and you'll help me and I'll help you." And that was a huge thing for me. It's one of the most important things to happen. It's a possibility that if Due South doesn't happen for me at that time, I'm not in this industry. I'm not part of Barrel of Monks, because I might have burnt out and just got out of it altogether. So to hear that Due South closed was shocking to me. I don't know what everybody in our industry locally thinks about the brand and the health of it and the styles and all that kind of stuff. But I always thought that Due South was kind of bulletproof, because they had a couple brands that were grandfathered in this industry locally. They had grocery store set placements. They had tons of draft handles all over Boynton Beach and in Palm Beach County. And when I was agonizing on whether to leave Due South to open up Barrel of Monks, my big question in my head was, Due South is going to be here. This is the sure thing. Am I going to jump because I get ownership in this one and do it myself and maybe fail, and maybe Barrel of Monks flops and falls on its face and Due South is still up and running and doing its thing? I thought Due South was a sure thing and Barrel of Monks was the risk or the gamble. And we're only 7 years old. Who knows what we'll be in 3 years? But all that stuff put together is kind of a mindfuck for me. The fact that this place is closing down, and it's the biggest brewery we've seen in our area close. There's been some smaller ones for sure. And now it's got me wondering, I'm sorry I'm being long-winded here, but my partners and I often talk about the fact where other people wax poetic about other breweries. Oh, they're doing this much production. Oh, they're in this grocery store. Oh, they have all these draft handles out there. And one of my partners, Keith, always says, yeah, doesn't mean they're profitable. Anyone can go out there and throw beer around and not make money off of it. And it has me wondering, are there other breweries that aren't as old, because Due South is one of the OGs? How many other breweries are out there not making a lot of money? How many breweries out there are not healthy financially? And is the pandemic the thing that pushes them over the edge? And it's not going to happen during the pandemic. It's going to be a delayed reaction. What does our industry in South Florida, what does our industry in the country look like in the next 5 years.
I think Kevin makes an amazing point about wondering where everybody is at in this, because I have a friend, I won't mention who or what brewery they work for. They are local. They're a couple years old, but
are we playing a guessing game here?
What's up?
Are we playing a guessing game here? Like
No. I don't want to, this is private information that they shared with me, and I don't want to put it out there, at least, who they are and whatever, but all of a sudden their landlord hit them up for like $300,000 in back rent. That was, pushed off during the pandemic, and they were expected to just, pay that off in addition to maintaining ongoing rent going forward. So they're like, holy shit, we have to go somewhere else or figure out what we're going to do. I have been very, very surprised. I mean, it's like the business side of this, the distributing side of this, you guys know, is not my forte and not my interest at all. Like, I won't even pretend to feign interest in any of it. But, at the end of the day, you have to be a functioning, profitable business. I feel like I've been behind the scenes long enough and had enough private conversations with people in this industry from top to bottom, owners to cellarmen to keg washers. And I'm very surprised that a lot of breweries have survived this. We had a note or a letter from the Florida Brewers Guild go out at some point last year to the state, requesting help from the state, saying, we're going to lose 200 breweries in the next month or so if something. So it was something along those lines.
I remember that.
Yeah, and obviously that didn't happen. But I mean, I'm not going to name anyone, but there are a few that I'm just like, how are those fucking guys still in business? And I don't mean to be insulting about it or anything. I'm trying to be just as realistic as I can. But there are some breweries we know of that just don't have good beer. They're run like shit. It's not a good experience to go there. And they're not even anywhere nearly big enough to maintain. Kevin thought, maybe Due South size, would kind of keep them in the game. But there are some tiny ones that I'm like, I don't even know how they're keeping the lights on. And I'm not rooting for anyone to fail because, it's jobs and livelihoods and all that stuff. But it is surprising that Due South fell before several others.
It's a good point. But I think one other thing to look at with this is not just pandemic, but another thing that they mention in their whole little announcement is kind of real estate, landlord issues. I do know that they have a different landlord than when we left there, which would be their third different owner of that building in the time that they've been there. And they're closing right before 10 years. So anyone who knows a little bit about like how real estate goes for commercial stuff and lease agreements, a lot of times you have 5 and 5 deals, like a 5-year lease with a 5-year option on top of that. And that's what Due South had. I don't know what they were paying, but that's right along the lines of being towards the end of a 10-year lease. I've heard things. I'm not going to talk numbers or anything, but I heard that there were some disagreements on rent increases over there. And our fucking real estate market is insane right now. Not just Florida, the fucking country. And I know that probably weighed very heavily on this decision as well.
I mean, I thought commercial real estate was taking a shit because of all this work from home and everything like that.
But that, you're talking more about office space with that, Joel. You're not talking about production facilities. You're not talking about warehousing. That's one of the things that we have a hard time understanding about that side of the business. I mean, I talked to several people in our industry, right? Friends and even people in restaurants during the pandemic, and said, hey, go to your landlord and say, listen, if you don't give me some relief here, and I'm not talking about you're going to take my next 3 months and then split it up over the next year. And I'm not talking about that. If you do not give me 3 months rent, I will not be able to pay you and I'm going to close down. Right? But at the end of the day, there's other people that want to move into those spots in those commercial kind of situations. So there's a lot of leverage there. And it's one of the toughest things in our industry is finding every single time someone comes to me and starts talking about, I want to open a brewery. First of all, I say, you're in South Florida. Stop. Don't do that. Please. Keep your idea. Give it a few years. Let's see where it's at. But the second part of that is, where are you going to go? Because the big problem with real estate for a brewery is if you want to be somewhere that people can get to you, your real estate is going to be exorbitantly expensive. If you want to produce and sell beer and be on a place that's walkable. If you want to just produce in cheap warehouse space, well, then no one can get to you. And you look at Due South and the brewery district, it's another reason why, for those of us or those people that are not in this area, there's 3 breweries in walking distance of each other. One of them, our friend Mike here works at. They get that traffic. They have more people coming to the area. It's another reason why I thought it was a kind of a bulletproof kind of thing, because the rent there is, I know the rent's much cheaper than Barrel of Monks. Let's put it that way. And I thought that the rent would be inexpensive enough to be okay, but you don't know what a landlord's going to do, especially when the place has been sold to somebody else. Yeah. It's so tenuous when you don't own your building, right? When you don't own your own real estate. And there's not a lot of people that can invest $2.5 million in equipment and build out in a brewery and also buy the property for what? $2 million as well? So now instead of opening up with 2.5, you got to have 5? Not a lot of people with those kind of deep pockets with the knowledge that's necessary to actually do this right.
Yeah, and I mean, we are lucky enough to own our building now. As of 6-8 months ago, we purchased our building, but we have a lot of regulars who come into our place who own businesses in our warehouse area where we're at, who have been telling us about, like, and they are renters, and they like, our rent's being increased. We had to cut down some of our space because we couldn't afford the entire space. We had like 2 units. Now we only have 1 unit. And like it's, and it is still, the warehouse areas are, and industrial areas are still way cheaper than your like commercial retail downtown-ish areas. Like, you want to look at the Boynton area of where I'm talking about, the brewery district, and you're looking at like $15 a square foot per year, where you go to like downtown West Palm for a retail space and they're looking for $35, $45, $55 a square foot per year for those things. It's huge. It's a really big fucking difference. And I mean, I don't know what Due South's initial lease agreement was. I don't know what their conversations with the landlords were looking like, but apparently it was big enough that it was an issue that they couldn't afford to be there anymore. And when we start looking at these, it might be, Joel, because of that kind of way lease agreement structures work with 5 years and 5 years on some of these things, it might be another year or 2 before we start seeing other places fall. Because if Due South was one of the early ones, It's going to be a little bit before we start seeing other 10 years come up, seeing 5 years coming up on some other people's lease agreements. And it might be fucking stupid at that point. And we start seeing actual ones drop at that point.
This might be a bit tasteless, but do you think it's like Final Destination where the brewery that opened after them is next?
Which one would that be, Joel? Do you know?
Fuck if I know.
You know, if you would have asked me that probably 5 years ago, I would have probably known that like pretty quickly, but I don't anymore.
Yeah, for sure.
Well,
Yeah,
let me just say that ownership of your building is not a fucking guarantee at all of success, because the brew pub I was at, we were doing pretty fucking well on the beer side, owned the building, and out of business in less than 3 years, I think.
It's a complex business, guys. I mean, the what you're talking about, Joel, is now you got a food aspect. Now you're competing with restaurants that are in walking distance of you. You know, there's so much that goes into this industry. There's so much to go into opening a restaurant, a bar, a beer bar, a brew pub, a production brewery. And the thing that I am so interested in is sizing your brewery and having expectations that are realistic. And a business plan that actually says, well, listen, if we can get to X barrels with this rent, with this proportion of it being in package, this proportion of it being in draft, and this proportion of it being in distribution, and this proportion of it being in the tap room, it's a complex equation. And at some point, you're just writing numbers on a page and kind of hoping you get there. But what I'll bring up something that happened at Due South, and I remember being there with you guys working together and having Mike Hawker say, "Hey guys, all we want to do is get to 4,500 barrels. Once we get to 4,500 barrels, the bills are all paid. Everything's going to be gravy. We're all going to be happy. Back then, we used to have Mondays off, right? The brewery was closed on Mondays. We'll keep Mondays off, and we're going to be great." And a few months later, I heard, if we can just get to 6,000 barrels, if we get to 6,000 barrels, we can do it in this facility, and we can. And there was the goalpost kept moving, and I don't know if that was out of the latest financial documents or statements or reports run in QuickBooks. I don't know where that was coming from, but knowing where you need to get as far as your production and what percentage of that has to be packaged and distro and whatnot. I don't think a lot of people know that. I don't think a lot of people do that at those equations. And I think that's to the detriment of our industry. And then when someone runs a lease for 5 years, they go, okay, I got 5 years to do this. And they've been pouring money into a black hole for 5 years. And then they go, well, I'm out. Or 10 years or what have you, because they didn't get to that break-even point. Or they got to the break-even point and they realized they weren't profitable at it. That's got to be the most defeating thing in the world. Hey, we did 4,000 barrels last year, and we're selling beer to every single grocery store in our basic area, and we're selling every drop of beer we have, and we're not making money. How many restaurants, how many boutique shops, how many places have said the same thing? But we happen to have in our industry hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars of equipment and build out in 10,000 square feet. And 14 employees. It's an industry. It's an interesting industry, and it's a lot more complicated than I think a lot of people want to or realize when they're getting into it.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of people who look at it as like, oh, we can brew beer on the weekends, and we can run a tasting room for Thursday through Sunday, like for 5-6 hours, and this is going to be a passion project, and blah 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 blah. No, you're not in the fucking countryside of Belgium, motherfucker. Like that's not how this works.
Are you talking specifically about one of my partners?
There, but I'm sorry.
Wow. Okay, Mike. Gloves off. Seriously, this is a salty podcast. I didn't realize I was going to be the point of contention here. Go ahead, Mike.
But I mean, a business is a business is a business is a business, and you're only going to get out of it what you're going to put into it. And beer has gotten to this point to where these passion project things just don't work anymore unless you have owned a building that's been in your family for generations, that you owe nothing on, you pay very little on. Like that sort of shit don't fly. Like I can't remember how many months ago, but this brewery out in Colorado Springs, Trinity Brewing, some people know them. They did Red Swing Line. They were a popular brewery for a period of time, and I can't remember if they closed down or their owner left, and he's like, I want to go do what I originally set out to do and open up a small brewery where I'm the brewer and I'm the bartender and I'm only open these many days. Good fucking luck with that in 2020 or 2021, whatever. That's not going to fucking happen when you have a fucking rent that you can barely afford. You're not going to get that done being open 4 hours a day for 3 days a week because you're brewing, you're bartending, you're trying to raise a family, you might have another job. That just ain't the fucking way that this industry works anymore. I'm sorry if I'm killing someone's dream on the artistic look of this, the fucking romanticism that this industry portrays out there. This is a job. This is a thing that you work fucking hard for and you need to make money for in order to stay afloat. Just the way it is.
Mike's out here killing dreams. Mike the Dream Killer. That's another t-shirt, guys. We have 2 t-shirts now out of this episode.
I don't remember what Joel's was.
Something about he won't walk up a flight of stairs for a joke.
Something I won't walk up 2 flights of stairs for a joke.
One of the aspects that is important in what you just said is that I think some of those opportunities are still there. I think there are some really tiny, uber small nano breweries that can work. But what ends up happening for most people is they go, I want to do that in my town. And they live in Boca Raton, Florida, or they live in Pompano Beach, or they live in St. Clair Shores, Michigan. That's where I'm from. Maybe it works in that town, maybe it doesn't. But people say, well, I want to work where I live. Well, no, you don't necessarily live in a place that can support that kind of business. If you want to open an artisanal cupcake shop, you have to go to a place where that can work. And if it can't work in Sheboygan, well, then don't open it there. If your artisanal craft brewery... If your craft brewery concept does not work in your hometown, you've got to go to a place that it does work, where the people will flock to local, where you'll be the only game in town, where you'll have maybe the rent's a little bit cheaper. But what people end up wanting is they say, well, I have this great idea, and I'm going to fit this square peg into this oblong hole no matter what anybody tells me, because my idea is great, and come hell or high water, it's going to work because I love it and I think it's amazing. And every now and then it works, but it's one of the poison pills of the industry is people just saying, "Well, I've got a great idea and it's going to work." Well, in the restaurant business, the brewing business, and most businesses, you got to have all the stars need to align.
Just so you know, there is no beers named Oblong Hole out there. So if you want it, it's yours.
Interesting. That's where your mind went.
Joel, you look high or like you're going to fall asleep. Say something.
No, as you guys have been, I feel like we veered off course a little bit. I mean, I went through the comments on that Due South announcement, and I think at the time I read that, and I read every single one. It must have been like 270 of them. And there was one type of comment that kept repeating and kept showing up. And it was obviously of disappointment, but so many fucking people said, this was my first craft brewery. This was my gateway place. This was where I had birthday parties and my kids, I brought my kids there and all of those nostalgic memories. And, as you said earlier, Mike, it was one of the first production places, but let's not forget the tap room. I don't remember how many goddamn square feet the place was, but, there was a minute where that place was seriously live. I mean, we would work, 'cause we both started there just pouring beer on the weekends, and that place would fucking be jamming on some weekends.
You and I would work Saturday at noon. We would work open till like 5, 6 o'clock. There'd be points like when the switchover of shifts would be happening, we'd have to stay on because there were still not enough people to run the ship, and it was incredible. I look back on those days with fond memories and realizing that I should never be bartending to people because I'm an awkward as fuck person who just doesn't know how to communicate in that fashion. But they were still great memories, and especially it was like every other weekend I worked with you there at the beginning, and then it became like every weekend, and it's like, here I am working with my buddy, slinging beers, making walking out of the door with $100 or $200 in cash in my pocket that I didn't have, and I just did that by pouring beer, giving beer to people who wanted beer, and maybe talking a little bit about it. It was fucking awesome. Maybe I should be a bartender because I like that. I like the money part of it. Just don't like talking.
Well, that's kind of what I was getting at, and I think we discussed so much of the business side of it, and we're about 3/4 of the way through this episode now, but I don't think we got personal enough. I mean, Kevin certainly did. But, I started there. I was technically, they used to joke that I was the very first employee because even though a whole bunch of us started on day one, May 12th, 2012.
Some started on May 11th for the soft opening. I wasn't one of them.
Well, I was there technically pouring beer for them at the Jupiter Craft Brewers Festival, I guess in late January of that year. So I had everybody beat as far as pouring those beers by about 4 months or so. But it was really one of those... I don't even know what the word is, but it was a place where so many of us started, whether it was just pouring beers or getting into the industry, really getting into it, or, just guests, customers there, their first craft beers and their first breweries to visit. And for me, I remember I was bartending twice a month to start, and I loved it so much because I was a couple years into beer, and I just always wanted to be there. I thought it was so cool. I knew nothing about beer, really. I mean, I drank a lot of beer, went to because, we had 1 trillion bottle shares back then. There weren't breweries to go to, as you mentioned, so we were constantly doing bottle shares. There were a few places we could go, gastropubs here and there. A lot of us hung out at Coffee District. A lot of us would watch Kevin get real shitty with patrons at the Funky Buddha Lounge.
Very true.
But, this was a brewery, and we... I'm totally losing my train of thought here. But like I had started there part-time just like you. We were bartending a couple times. I was just doing it to make some fucking extra grocery money. I mean, I was languishing in cubicle hell. A lot of people know that, side of my story. So I won't get into that, but less than a year into the place being open, I started talking to you about, is there anything there that I could come do? And I took like a 35% pay cut to come fucking leave corporate America and just wash kegs and shit all day. Yeah, I just wanted to be part of a place that I enjoyed and was into and had some interest in. I never had a job that I liked before. So I was happy to be there anytime. I mean, I was sitting in my goddamn cubicle all day watching the emails roll in from like the bar staff going, hey, can anyone cover me tonight? And I would jump on it like, yes, I will be there, because I just wanted to be there. Wasn't making a ton of money or anything. I just wanted to be at the place and have some fun, pour some beers, drink a couple free ones at the end of the night. I mean, it was a lot of fun at the time. And then eventually, you had made the jump before I did, and you were there full time, and I started talking to you about it. And I know this sounds so fucking corny, but this is like a confession moment, and this is so lame, but I came over to your house. I don't remember what we were doing. Maybe we were recording United We Drink, like the old version of it, something like that. And I sat with you at your place, which was right down the street from the brewery. And we talked about the possibility of me coming over full time. And you said you would put in a word for me and kind of initiate that discussion with the boss. And I know this is so lame, and I don't believe in like fate or signs or any of that shit, but I get in my car and the song Try by Pink is on. And it just kept repeating to me, like, you gotta get up and try. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I fucking hate what I do. I'm so miserable. I gotta do this. I gotta go after this, no matter what it means, no matter, jumping into a career I know nothing about, taking a massive pay cut, whatever that means, I gotta take the chance. And I'm glad I did, because I'm so much better for it. But, that place, it has a special, place in my heart because of what it did for me and the friends I made and the path it put me on. They did a lot for me. They sent me to fucking UC Davis for a week, and then they backed me in, recommending me for the Doble scholarship that same year, which I amazingly won from the Guild. And then they paid to send me to fucking Chicago for 2 weeks for the Siebel Institute. They put so much faith and trust in me in so many different moments. And it was the first job I ever had where I felt like, someone would say, well, what do you think? And be serious about that. Like they actually wanted my input as if it meant something. And I did get to a point where I was there a bit too much. I mean, my wife was threatening to leave me because I was there night and day. I was taking like Tri-Rail home, and I would have like fucking 8 shift beers and then get on Tri-Rail, and I'd pass out and miss my stop and end up in fucking Pompano, and my wife would have to come get me all the way down there. I mean, it was, some of like the worst times, but you look back and laugh at them. But I mean, that fucking place, it's overwhelming to think about all the stuff that went on in all the years we were there. And I know that life kind of has its cycle, and, things are here and then they're not there. I've really learned that lesson the hard way in the past couple of years with family I've lost, but, it's still weird to hear, it's going to be a strange thought that brand's not going to be around.
Yeah, it really is. And I didn't realize. I don't know if you ever told me about the whole Pink song thing.
Never told a soul.
I mean, I know that I tried to sell you hard on coming in there because I wanted you to just get out of the cubicle hell and do something different and maybe, and also just hang out with me. But, yeah.
I think that one of the important things, Joel, and thank you for sharing all that, but one of the most important things in this is that when we were all there, we had sometimes pretty serious reservations about some of the things that we were doing, some of the beers we were making. There's always conflict. There's always things you don't like about your job. Period. End of story. Everybody has that. But to disregard those things and make it seem like, oh, but that was a terrible place to be, and I'm not talking about Due South, I'm talking about the world in general. These are transformative moments that we all had in our lives. I said that I may not even be in this industry if not for Due South Brewing. Obviously, Joel, you're saying the exact same thing, and we've gotten to a point in our lives where we can reflect on that, and it can be special and meaningful, and still, a lot of the things pissed us off, and we can sit here and we can talk about those for hours too. It can be both. It can be both of those things, and they can exist concurrently. But the fact that we have those memories, we get a chance to talk about those and share those and joke about them. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited in this podcast that we can now. It seems like we've broken the seal. We can talk. We can say Due South Brewing, right? So,
For this episode.
Yeah. Oh, just in this episode. Okay, gotcha. But there's so many things. There's so many things that we experienced together that were wonderful and that we'll take with us for the rest of our lives. I mean, I'm grateful for it. I will miss that place. And hearing you talk about that, Joel, made me a little bit misty-eyed, made me very nostalgic. I have not gone into Due South. I think I went in and had one beer, maybe two in the last 7 years, I think. Now I'm saying, hey, we got to go in there and have a beer together. Should we do it?
Yeah, we
Joel
were
is already
working on
making that happen, I think.
Okay.
For those who are local, they announced that December 19th is going to be the final day of the tap room being open. I think Joel has been working with some other OG folks on trying to put together a date to go in and have some beers well before then to kind of avoid some of maybe the shit show. But you know what? I would like to. I know we're getting really tight on time here. So if there is something to leave this on with a good note and a little maybe good time, good story that you had, Kevin, what's something that you can look fondly back on your time at Due South and be like, yeah, that was a good time. Don't get too long-winded, but let's leave this nice.
Yeah, I thought we were going to do I was actually planning this for my last call.
Okay,
so,
do it as your last. Let's have this be our last calls. Joel,
okay,
fire up the last call you had queued up for next time.
God damn it.
So one of my favorite memories about Due South was there was a day where I was brewing. Joel was there. We were all there, the three of us and several other people. And Mike Hawker walks in the brew house or in the brewery area with a tray. No. Actually, I'm sorry. He called us into the bar area. And in the bar area, he had a tray of Cat 3 in small pour, 4-ounce glasses, 5-ounce glasses. And he asked all of us, he said, this is Cat 3. Try it. And we all tried it. And he said, what do you think? And we all said, it's tastes like Cat 3, good batch. We were kind of looking for the angle. Like, did we screw something up? Was it a bad batch? Did he not like it? We didn't know. We were all just, oh, yeah, it tastes like Cat 3. Everything's good. He's like, it's good. We're happy with this one. That's good. I said, yeah, this is a good batch of Cat 3. And then his next step was to turn around and go, who's Steve? And we still have no idea what's going on. And there's a guy at the bar who raises his hand and goes, I'm Steve? And he goes, Steve, you just rated this beer on Untappd at 2 out of 5 or whatever and said this, and this. Well, all these guys make this beer, and they think this beer is really, really good, and this is a good batch of that beer. Can you tell us why you did that? And the guy just started stuttering and stammering and didn't really know what to say because he's being confronted by basically the entire brewing staff of the people that made that beer. And all of us kind of got in line and kind of posed up like, yeah, Steve, why don't you tell us why you didn't like this beer that we brewed? And I love the fact that, first of all, it's bananas. It is not something I would ever do. It is crazy to do something like that. But I think it was so indicative of Mike's philosophy and who he was. And also so apropos that all of us kind of got in line immediately and started defending our product. And I don't know what ended up happening with the guy. He felt very uncomfortable. He probably left and said terrible things about the brewery going forward. But when I think of Due South, I think you have all the great things about that brewery, all the things that were at times cringeworthy about it, whatever, all wrapped up in that little bow. One of my absolute favorite stories.
I'm kind of glad that for a second I thought that you were going to tell the story that I was going to tell, and that is of CBC in Denver with you and I, and my first and second times having edibles. And it wasn't my first time that was necessarily the story, but the second time that was the story of, just to put it briefly, I was hit hard by them. I remember the first night being pretty stoned, Kevin being pretty stoned, and then the second day being like, oh, let's up this ante a little bit. And I should not have upped the ante. And let's just say I convinced a group of people to walk way longer than they should have, and decided to go to bed at like 8 o'clock because I thought it was midnight. And good times. Crazy times, but good times. Hanging out, doing the CBC thing in the Mile High City with my buddy Kevin.
Those trips were fun. A lot of Keys trips, a lot of good trips down with Due South.
Joel?
Oh man, there's so many I could do here. Okay, I got one. So as I said, the bar used to get pretty crazy, and we had a guy there. I don't think he's there anymore, but I don't want to use his name. I mean, everyone, I assume, is looking for work there now. I don't want to offer any cancelable stories to their resume, but you'll know who I'm talking about when I describe him. He was a very good friend of the owners and like a total loyal puppy dog and soldier, and would be a total bull in the china shop and just like, fucking tap. Like, we had one walk-in at the time, and he would tap specialty kegs that were supposed to go out to, distribution the next day, fucking treatments that we couldn't remake in time. And he was just like, put them, there's a keg I can tap. We'll just put that on tonight and fucking run through it. There was one night though, man, this had to have been like a weekend night. And I'm pretty sure I'm working in the brewery, but I'm also still bartending some nights to make a little extra cash, kind of supplement my income. And there is like this, I don't know if it's a couple. I don't know if it's a father and his adult daughter, because there seemed to be a little bit of age disparity there. But this guy is it's a full bar. But these two were clearly together in some fashion. And this gentleman is just sitting there looking straight ahead, drinking his beer. No sign of any weirdness or anything. But the woman he's with, I don't know if it's his girlfriend, I don't know if it's his daughter, is just uncontrollably sobbing and crying all night long. I mean, clearly this guy is not sharing the same emotion because he's not behaving the same way. It's not like they're two people who experience the same kind of loss together and are feeling the same thing. I mean, she clearly was much more visibly upset than he was. There's fucking just soggy tissues all over the bar. And now we're starting to think, like, is this some sort of human trafficking situation? Like, is she his hostage? Is he her captor? Like, we don't know what's going on. It's just making everyone at the bar uncomfortable. It's making all of the staff uncomfortable. Nobody knows how to approach it. But this guy is just staring straight ahead, drinking his beers. She's sitting right next to him, bawling her eyes out all night. And finally, this bartender that we were working with that I mentioned finally goes, so we had the outdoor bar, and then there was like the fucking mud flap type window thing that we would walk through into the semi-air conditioned smaller tap room. But that was where all the staff would kind of hide at night. They'd go back there to cool off. They'd go back there to, get more glassware, whatever it was. But that's where we would all kind of congregate once everything was good on the outside bar. So he comes back and he just goes, and he's got this real gruff, kind of rough voice. And he comes in the back and he goes, "Fucking bitch, I'll give her something to cry about." And like everyone just like erupted with uncomfortable laughter. Like no one knew what the fuck was going on, but like his off-color comment at least kind of broke the tension and got everybody to lighten up a little bit, because people were freaking out. Like, we didn't know what the fuck was going on. And then they just kind of closed out their tab and went about their night. I know it's kind of a anticlimactic story, but it was one of those you had to be there situations. But there were so many moments like that, just people cracking the craziest jokes to kind of lighten the mood, or the little things they would do to like fuck with unruly customers. There was very much a familial kind of, I don't want to use the word brotherhood because we worked with other women too, but there was definitely a vibe that we had there among most of us in the early days, that we were kind of a family. We were all together in this, and it was a camaraderie. That's the word I'm looking for. There was a definite camaraderie that we all had that made the place feel special, and is one that I don't know if I've really seen since.
So, I asked for feel-good moments, and you each gave uncomfortable moments.
Because that's what the place was.
I felt good about mine.
You feel good about making this is Kevin, who
No, it was a great moment for us as a staff. It was funny. It was irreverent. It was something you would experience nowhere else. I can't imagine it happening anywhere in any other brewery. And mine very much epitomized what Due South was and what my experience with that brewery was. Listen, I could have talked about Joel climbing a fiberglass waterfall in the Keys,
fucking knew he was
cutting
going
his
there.
feet up, and perching on top in a very adorable way. There's a lot of things we could talk about. We could talk about this for several podcasts.
find that on our Patreon. All right, so that's our last calls. It's time to wrap this shit up. Time to plug stuff. Joel, what do you want to plug?
Joel Brews on Twitter until I take another fucking break from all the bullshit.
Probably by the
Florida
time this episode
DUH
comes out.
Brewer on Instagram. And of course, you can find me at Barrel of Monks.
Kevin?
I'm still not on any kind of social media, so nothing. Nothing to plug.
Okay. You can find me at Mike Loves Beer on Twitter and Instagram. I'm at Copperpoint Brewing in Boynton Beach. And find us, none of our fucking social media is streamlined, but on the usernames at least. But just look for us. You'll find us. And you can find the show at United We Drink on Twitter, at United We Drink Pod on Instagram. We're on Facebook as well. Website is unitedwedrink.com. We're on all of the major podcast streaming services such as Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, wherever fine podcasts are found. Excuse me. You can support the show financially by visiting some of our sponsors, such as Liquid Death, Death Wish Coffee, Liquid Death Wish, as I like to call them, the AHA, Wink for your wine delivery services. There's tons of stuff. Go to unitedwedrink.com/sponsors. If you can't find something that you can actually enjoy and support the show in the meantime, I don't know what you have going on with your life.
I just want to also add it. If you watch the movie Death Wish, we also somehow get money. So do that too.
Charles Bronson's estate pays us just a little bit of money if you watch that.
So do that, please.
There's also our web store, unitedwedrink.com/store, to buy shirts, buttons, stickers, and maybe eventually a shirt that says Joel didn't walk up 2 flights of steps for a joke, and then I don't remember mine. Kevin, what's mine?
Neither do I. It's past the moment. We'll figure it out for next time.
In the meantime, thank you everyone once again for checking us out. We will see you in a couple weeks. Cheers.
To Due South.
Enjoy Arby's.
Enjoy
Cheers.
Arby's. Hail Satan.